Hello, YouTubers. Welcome to Level-Headed News. This is your host, Brenda. I have a first edition for you here this morning. There's 14 articles in this one, politics of some kind or another, and all the URLs are listed in the description of this video for your convenience. The first one here is off of westernjournalism.com, and it says, China sends warships of Japanese island. Mattis declares U.S. Let's scroll this up here a little bit. Moving a little slow this morning. Rainy morning here, and the hamster's not wanting to get with the program. There we come, slow but sure. Days after, well, and then the hamster got a little too energetic. Let's get this back to where I can read it. Feast or famine, chicken or feathers. 2 days after Defense Secretary James Mattis criticized China and vowed to protect Japan in the event of an attack, China sent 3 warships into Japanese waters close to the disputed Shinkaku Islands. The ships entered Japanese territorial waters Monday and proceeded to approximately 12 miles from the shore of the islands. On Saturday, Mattis and Japanese Defense Minister, and I'm not good with these foreign names, Tomomi, and I'm guessing that I'm pronouncing that right, held a joint press conference in Tokyo. And in the conference, Mattis said, I made clear that our long-standing policy on the Shinkaku Island stands. The U.S. will continue to recognize Japanese administration of the islands. As such, Article 5 of the U.S.-Japan Security Treaty applies. Get it to scroll up a little bit. Poor little hamster, he's working 3 legs right off this morning. There we go. Article 5 states each party recognizes that an armed attack against either party in the territories under the administration of Japan to its own peace and safety, and declares that it would act in common danger. Any such armed attack and all measures taken as such, or try that again, measures taken as a result thereof, shall be immediately reported to the Security Council of the United Nations in accordance with the provisions of Article 51 of the Charter. Mattis continued, I want there to be no misunderstanding that during the transition in Washington that we stand firmly 100% shoulder to shoulder with you and the Japanese people. And there is video in this that the article continues, play by the rules, and if we have them to arbitration, tell them and get the hamster to calm down here. There we go. We don't settle them by taking military means and occupying land that is subject to question about who actually owns it. Chinese Foreign Ministry said in a statement, we urge the U.S. side to take a responsible attitude, stop making wrong remarks, and avoid making the issue more complicated and bring instability to the regional situation. The sovereignty of the uninhabited Senkaku Islands has long been point of dispute among Japan, China, and Taiwan. This was not the first time that China had sent ships into Japanese waters, the islands. Last June, Japan notified the Chinese ambassador of its concern that a Chinese ship had sailed within 24 miles of the Senkaku Islands. The Japanese Coast Guard reported in November that 4 Chinese warships sailed into the disputed waters surrounding the islands. Japanese Coast Guard in November that 4 Chinese warships sailed into the disputed waters surrounding islands. Exactly what the U.S. will do is unclear, but Mattis said, what we have to do is exhaust all efforts, diplomatic efforts, to try to resolve this properly. Then I have another one concerning this. Back, and I'll go ahead and throw that out here at the same time. Yeah, here it is. It's off of Western Journalism. And get the hamster to get it up here. It says, Mattis, North Korea attack on U.S. or allies will meet effective and overwhelming response. Get the hamster to get it up here, little buddy. Legs and move to reassure South Korea of U.S. support against North Korea aggression. James Mattis warned North Korea on Friday of an effective and overwhelming response if it chose to use nuclear weapons. Any attacks on the United States or our allies and any use of nuclear weapons would be met with a response that would be effective and overwhelming, Mattis said at South Korea's defense ministry, concluding a two-day visit. Secretary of Defense also confirmed that the United States is expected to take action later in the year, if not before, with a deployment of its missile defense system known as Terminal High Altitude Area Defense in South Korea. 30,000 U.S. troops in South Korea, the United States possesses military presence in the area. Mattis said the Trump administration remains steadfast in its ironclad defense commitments to the region. South Korean government supports THAAD deployment. Elections coming up, there is no guarantees that the next administration will share that support. China and other nations have expressed concerns with that deployment. It's addressed maintaining the U.S. stance that North Korea's behavior would be the ones for such actions. And get it to scroll up a little more. Poor little fella. Not for the provocateur, we would have that out there, Mattis said. Free to no nation Korea. North Korea's UN resolution and sanctions with its 20 missile tests in 2016, leading some critics, Senator Ted Cruz, Republican of Texas, to air some grievances with former President Barack Obama's policy in the area. They're elaborating upon deep concerns about U.S. policy of strategic patience toward Pyongyang, detail 5 steps to change North Korea's behavior, enforce U.S. laws, stop protecting China, bolster the Navy, deploy a ballistic missile system region, and reclassify North Korea as a state sponsor of terror. Mattis, who has widespread respect among enlisted military men and women, has wasted no time in efforts to establish such respect on a global scale. Today, a massive bombing operation against ISIS terrorists in Syria and Iraq, a variety of fighters, bombers, and remotely piloted aircraft engaged in the strike, which saw 25 strikes in Syria and 6 in Iraq. Strikes destroyed 12 tactical units, 2 underground improvised explosive bomb factories, and an ISIS headquarters. 2 ISIS oil wells in Deir. Mattis' Friday statement preceded newly established sanctions against 24 Iranian, Chinese, and Emirati businesses for their alleged role in supporting Iran's ballistic missile program. U.S. officials argued the sanctions did not violate the 2015 nuclear agreement with Iran crafted under the Obama administration. U.S. officials said maintained the right Iranian companies and personnel involved in missile development and terrorism. Last week, Iran conducted at least one ballistic missile test, though Tehran tests violate neither the new United Nations Security Council resolutions. I have for you, writers. As soon as the hamster catches up, here we go. It says Republicans in Congress just blocked Trump's order. This is exactly what Democrats wanted. Second, there, I actually thought that the establishment, Republicans in Congress, were paying attention to the people and what they want, but I was wrong. Today on CNN, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell announced that Republican majority Congress will not be funding Trump's investigation into voter fraud. Tapper says, do you want to spend taxpayer money to hunt for those apparently non-existent 3 to 5 million illegal votes? And McConnell says, well, you know, this sort of thing is handled at the state level, and Democrats always claim there is no election fraud at all. That is, of course, not true. Election fraud does occur. There is no evidence that it occurred in such a significant number that would have changed the presidential election. And I don't think we ought to spend any federal money investigating that. I think the states can take a look at this issue. Many of them have tried to tighten their voter rolls. People who are dead and otherwise not eligible to vote, and I think we ought to leave that at the state level. And the article continues. It says, yeah, because I'm sure that liberal states like California are going to jump at the chance to purge illegals from their voting rolls. What Republicans fail to understand is that Trump isn't bringing this issue to the forefront because of his election. It's to promote future elections. That the left is devastated by his win, and they are going to do anything to block him. Already been caught committing voter fraud on massive levels, and that was before we had Trump in the White House. Can you imagine how bad it's going to be now? And there's a video here if you want to take a look at that in this URL, Conservative Tribune, and it says, Insider says GOP about to pull the trigger, defends liberals' holy grail of Planned Parenthood. We're all in favor of women's health, and prenatal care is arguably a good investment of taxpayer funds. So it's two causes are the focus of Planned Parenthood's public outreach. Lie. And the new GOP-led Congress is about to pull the plug. Planned Parenthood is forbidden by law from using federal funds to provide abortions. Planned Parenthood claims that mammograms, prenatal care, and other women's health services are its primary focus, with abortion 3% of its services. In reality, Planned Parenthood performs about 34% of all abortions in this country every year, less than 2% of the breast cancer screenings, and less than 1% of pap smear tests, according to Lila Rose, founder and president of Live Action WND, reported. Tricky. The best estimate is that about 94% of Planned Parenthood services are abortion. They come up with 3% figure. They count every service separately, meaning that a pregnancy test, ultrasound, abortion, and pain pill are 4 separate services. In the New York Post. This is a little like performing an abortion and giving a woman an aspirin and saying only half of what you do is abortion, Lowry wrote. Rose makes it her mission to expose Planned Parenthood's real agenda and to work against the powerful pro-abortion lobby. The Republican-controlled Congress is preparing legislation that will defund Planned Parenthood, Rose said. Parenthood, the holy grail for the abortion lobby, Rose said that it was defunding measures that failed in President Barack Obama's administration will now succeed, and soon. President Donald Trump's nominee for Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services is a staunch proponent of the effort to defund Planned Parenthood. Price's bill to repeal the Affordable Care Act includes denying federal funds to any health care plan that funds abortions, according to the Washington Post. Under his bill, entire plans could be defunded, a strong incentive for plans to enrollees. According to the Social Security Administration, the average American income for 2015 The last year was $48,098. American contributes $5.34 per year to fund Planned Parenthood, according to Fox News. Vice President Mike Pence made it clear that abortion foes have an ally in the new administration. He spoke at the March for Life rally in Washington, D.C., telling the crowd that life is winning again, according to the Indianapolis Star. That I have for you is off of rickwells.us. And it says, leftist general criticizes Trump's anti-war comments, hits too close to home. The comments of libtard General Barry McCaffrey, another lifelong Seattle resident, fit well into the Trump bashing agenda of MSNBC. But his disparaging of President Trump goes back before Trump became commander-in-chief. His service to military industrial complex and the establishment for 32 years. At retirement, McCaffrey was the most highly decorated general, having been awarded 3 Purple Hearts. John Kerry and the Iran deal is proof that a Purple Heart doesn't make one a good judge of foreign policy. He takes exception to President Trump's comments about Vladimir Putin and the United States having killed a lot of people intimately involved in some of the unwarranted and unjustified killing in Vietnam and elsewhere over his long and decorated career. But heroes can do bad things, and it doesn't bestow a lifetime responsibility or criticism. Military service can provide excellent cover for promoting a leftist establishment anti-American agenda. An article McCaffrey wrote for the Seattle Times last August helps to illustrate and make the point that he is a tool of those who got rich by killing the establishment elites of the military-industrial complex. Warned us against them to no avail, and President Trump as well, although not by name. The Seattle Times piece, McCaffrey says he's proud of the non-affiliation with a political party and having worked for warmongering globalists of both parties, saying, I have worked with loyalty and genuine respect at very senior levels for both President George H.W. Bush and President Bill Clinton. Those two individuals deserve nobody's respect, abused and profiteered from their positions of power and continue to do so, along with their families. To this very day, both are globalists who support the subjugation of the United States to the UN and Bush's glorious New World Order. McCaffrey criticized President Trump for not remaining silent as the leftists him through their tool Kaiser Khan and the Democrat National Convention. He criticized President, then candidate Trump, for his refusal at the time to take a stance toward Russia. McCaffrey wrote, Trump has publicly praised Russian President Vladimir Putin, who has become a major threat to Western Europe with his invasion of the Ukraine and muscular threats to the Baltic states and NATO region military forces. Putin has also managed to reverse Russia's earlier steady march toward a law-based state and is turning that country into a criminal oligarchy. He defended John McCain as one of the most American military heroes since World War II, an exaggeration, and a slight of actual war heroes, like McCaffrey, who deserves our respect and honor for their actions under fire. He described President Trump as sounding like a 12-year-old and willfully and abusive. He is remarkably ignorant and uneducated about the world that we face and the means we may use to defend ourselves. McCaffrey closed that article with the assertion that Trump is unqualified to be the president of the United States and fulfill the role of commander-in-chief of the 2.2 million men and women of the armed forces. On the part of MSNBC to trot pony out of his Seattle Starbucks to repeat the same criticisms and positions this tool of the elites has expressed before. No, it's propaganda, and it's their specialty. President Trump's refusal to aggressively join O'Reilly in Putin bashing, something that would have provided no benefit to either him or the nation, and led to criticism from the same leftists as being irresponsible. McCaffrey said he was saying no one can argue that's the most anti-American statement ever made by the President of the United States, to confuse American values with Putin, who's running a criminal oligarchy, who kills people abroad and at home, who imprisons journalists and takes away business property, who shares it with his former KGB agents, who invades and seizes Crimea and the eastern Ukraine. This is an astonishing state of affairs. There's any comparison to the present day Libya or war in Iraq, in which we are unleashed shock and awe upon the Iraqis and executed the leaders of both nations. He stomps his feet over Crimea. McCaffrey ignores the American role in the overthrow of the Ukrainian president. He's silent about the insertion of Joe Biden's son, Hunter, uh, Burisma, a private oil and gas company in the Ukraine in May of 2014, shortly after the new government was seated. Devon Archer, a former senior advisor on his 2004 presidential campaign and a college roommate of Mr. Kerry's stepson. H.J. Hines also signed on with the company in April, but there was no takeover involved. It's all just as it is being told to the American people. Save your selective moral outrage, McCaffrey. President Trump is telling the truth, and a lot of people were killed, and some of it's done for totally invalid reasons, including profiteering. Why do you have a problem with President Trump not condemning Putin for his role in what are lesser offenses? Does honesty make you uncomfortable, or is it an absence of corruption and the true American first value that you can't handle? And there is some video, McCaffrey, in this if you want to pull that up to see that for yourself. The next one we have here is off of Gate to Liberty. It's a blog, and it's an open letter regarding Trump and Putin. And here's what it says. This open letter is addressed to certain senators and members of Congress, including Speaker Paul Ryan, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, Senator Ben Sasse, Senator Marco Rubio, and Congresswoman Liz Cheney, in the wake of comments they made over the weekend. Dear Senators and members of Congress, thank God for President Trump's honesty. In your coordinated weekend expressions of outrage over the president's comments regarding Putin and Russia, you are correct about one thing. There is no moral equivalence between the conduct of Russia under Vladimir Putin and the behavior of the United States during the quarter of a century that has elapsed since the Soviet Union collapsed. Putin wins that contest every time, and it is not even close. Since then, the United States has violently overthrown governments and invaded, bombed, and occupied territories in more than a dozen countries, stretching from the Balkans across North Africa, throughout the Middle East, and up into the Ukraine. During the same period, Russia has attacked no other nation, despite a blizzard of propaganda to the contrary, emanating from the bipartisan U.S. War Party and its allies in establishment media organs. During the last 25 years, the United States has caused the deaths of more than 1 million people in sovereign nations that have not attacked us, including hundreds of thousands of non-combatant men, women, and children. This trail of bloody carnage runs through the former Yugoslavia, Algeria, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria, Pakistan, Ukraine, Yemen, Somalia, and Syria, among others, and continues to this day. In contrast, Russia has conducted itself with admirable restraint despite the most recent United States aggression, in which the United States organized, funded, and directed the violent overthrow of the Ukraine's democratically elected government and inserted a puppet regime in its place in February of 2014. Senator John McCain and Hillary Clinton's Deputy Secretary of State, Victoria Nuland, were intimately and directly involved in that push. Just to be clear, I'm no penchant or peacenik. I believe defense of the nation is the federal government's primary responsibility. I'm a veteran of 5 years active duty service with the 1st Cavalry Division, the 7th Cavalry Division, and the 18th Airborne Corps. I am a small businessman and the father of 5 grown children, 2 of whom were career military men. I despise Marxism, socialism, and collectivism of all sorts, and for the most of my life, I have considered myself to be a conservative Republican. That self-identification ended when I finally realized that the Republican Party and the Washington events and diplomatic establishment had been subverted by an insane empire-building neoconservative cult during the Clinton administration. The hypocrisy that underlies your constant efforts to demonize Russia and Iran is disgusting and transparently obvious. For murderous thugs like you, who have been constant cheerleaders to Washington's bloody banditry and are implicit to its presumed to lecture the president of any other country about his conduct, is enough to make one vomit. I only hope the American people awaken quickly enough to bring you and your fellow criminals to justice before you ignite the great war you are working so hard to foment. Sincerely, Frank J. Brady, and he sent a carbon copy to President Trump. The next one that I have for you is off of BizPack Review, and it says, violent protesters make President Trump stronger. There will be blood, and most of it will be theirs. Keep it up, protesters, and you will assure more Trump victories. Protesters are enraged that Trump is telling illegal immigrants in the U.S. to go back to their home country and trying to stop inadequately vetted Muslims from entering our land. Yet these same demonstrators are hurling eggs, pepper spraying, and in some cases physically assaulting innocent people in storefront windows. That's right. Some of these professional hard left thugs rejecting conversation are sucker punching peaceful people. Trump supporters are being assaulted by rioters in black mass. If you're upset with violent street scenes now, just wait. More are coming. It's escalating. That's because when politics move against them, the hard left turns to violence and achieves its ends. That's the lesson taught by Stalin, Mao, Castro, Pol Pot, and Chavez. Most demonstrators are fomented by leftists because they can't get their way by legitimate means. They take to the streets with rocks and bottles, sometimes firebombs. We're seeing it now because violence is an ultimate tool of the left. In its mild form, we see street protests with people chaining themselves together, which may start peacefully then evolve into violence as protesters get more organized and grow in their numbers. The mainstream media falls for the trap, delighted to interview scruffy protesters, which assures their message will be spread widely. Thus, the media becomes culpable for spreading the crap that most protesting is all about. The news media is happy to be the enablers because they want to sell newspapers and boost viewers. Gotta have those readers any way they can get them. So the more blood and broken windows and bones, the better. Protesters are almost always in the minority, but the Associate Justice Anton Scalia said, the theory of democracy is that the majority rules. You protect minorities only because the majority determines that there are certain minority positions that deserve protection. Violent protesters are not deserving. Most of them do not have the common sense to realize that just because they're loud and physical doesn't mean they're right and doesn't mean they're entitled to anything. Political decisions in our republic should not be made based on decibel levels, and politicians reveal themselves as weaklings when they allow protesters to intimidate them. Ronald Reagan was no weakling. When Berkeley protesters threatened violence over 40 years ago, Reagan unleashed police to crack down on them. Later, he called a press conference, which included Berkeley officials, who asked Reagan if he considered negotiating. Reagan asked, "What's to negotiate?" All of it began because the first time some of you who knew better, Berkeley officers, and are old enough to know better, let young people think that they had the right to choose the laws that they would obey as long as they were doing it in the name of social protest. He then rose and walked out. So bring it on, people. People who throw rocks, should have their own skulls cracked by the police. It's time for protesters to meet the real world, where reasonable people painstakingly build a civilized society and should not tolerate it being torn down or burned up by a mob of miscreants bent on destruction. Decent and sensible Americans do not cotton to criminals who refuse to recognize the democratic process or the rule of law. Violence invites and justifies a violent response. If it's civil violence and battle royal the protesters want, that's what they'll get. The precious snowflakes will have to run to their safe spaces and hide. Some of these protesters have a motto: resistance works. It will work all right, but not the way they want. If they keep up the violence, if the abuse ideologues violate the law, there will be blood in the streets, and most of it will be theirs. The next one is off of Western Journalism, and it says, Chelsea Clinton joins Twitter attack on Conway's. Chelsea Clinton joined in the attacks on White House counselor Kellyanne Conway Friday after Conway used the wrong word in a TV interview to describe a 2011 terror plot that forced the Obama administration to review its procedures for admitting refugees into the United States. On Thursday night, Conway sought to put President Donald Trump's executive order on travel and immigration into the context of past responses to concerns over terrorism and refugees. And here's the quote: I bet it's brand new information to people that President Obama had a 6-month ban on Iraqi refugee program. Iraqis came here to this country, were radicalized, and they were the masterminds behind the Bowling Green massacre. Most people don't know that because it didn't get covered, Conway said. One problem: no one was massacred at Bowling Green, a fact Twitter seized upon. Here's some Twitter responses. It says, sad to see everyone politicizing the Bowling Green massacre so soon after it failed to occur. Another one says, Bowling Green massacre was as bad as Gotham City riots. Thankfully, Batman was able to put a stop to both of them. Very grateful no one seriously hurt in the Louvre attack or the completely Bowling Green massacre. Please don't make up attacks. And, it says, however, some folks on Twitter had to remind her of other events that might never actually have happened. It says, James Michael Sama says, Chelsea Clinton, seriously, this is why the media is the opposition party, because they're calling out all of this nonsense. Local lady says, wait, what about her mom coming under sniper fire in Bosnia, not defending Trump, but pot, meet kettle? Chelsea Clinton says, very grateful no one seriously hurt in the Louvre attack or the completely fake Bowling Green massacre. Please don't make up attacks. And Neo Taser says, yeah, what kind of disgusting liar invents attacks that never happened? Picture of Hillary and a front page cover of the New York Post that says, insult, Bosnians rip Hillary for her horrible lie. And then the article says, on Friday, Conway went to Twitter to clarify that she meant terrorists. And she says, on Hardball NBC News, MSNBC, I meant to say Bowling Green terrorists as reported here. And she's got the report with the terrorists and shows them with arms. And that's what she was talking about. It says she noted that she was referring to a 2011 incident in which 2 refugees were arrested for participating in a plot to send arms to Iraqis that could then be used to kill American soldiers. In the wake of that incident, the Obama administration reviewed its vetting for refugees from Iraq. It says Kellyanne Conway says, NBC reporter texted me at 6:32 a.m. regarding a different story, never asked what I meant on Hardball before slamming me on Today's Show. Not cool, not journalism. Honest mistakes abound. Last night, prominent editor of liberal site apologized for almost running a story regarding a tweet from a fake account, yet won't name him, attack him, get the base to descend upon him. Same with MLK Jr. bust fake story. It's called Class Grace Deep Breath. Conway noted that the media has become selective in the way it addresses individuals who make a word slip. Goodness gracious. The next one we have here is off of BizPac Review. It says, Marine vet evacuated from Iraq after telling the unvarnished truth about Trump's travel ban. A former U.S. Marine working as a security specialist in Iraq had to be evacuated after uploading a video on Facebook that chronicled truth in response to President Donald Trump's controversial executive order on immigration and refugees. Seen more than 42 million times. Good golly, I'm wrapping my brain cells around that. Seen more than 42 million times, Stephen Gurn explained in a video how an American would be treated in the countries that Trump included in his contemporary travel ban. Apparently, it wasn't safe for me to remain in the location I was in, he said in a follow-up video, so I'm being sent out. But he let it be known that this story has only just begun. Can't say much about what's happening right now, Gurn said, but what I will say is there's going to be a lot more to follow. So stay tuned, everybody. And there's a video. It says caution, strong language. So, you know, if you're easily offended, you might not want to watch it, but it's in this URL if you want to take a look at that. It says in the original video, Gurn explained that a lot of the Iraqis showed their displeasure in Trump's executive order, and he responded by asking them what would happen to him as an American citizen if he were to openly walk into a nearby town. He said that the Iraqis told him that he would be snatched up and killed within an hour. The point I'm trying to make is this. Is the local populace that would do this, Gurn said. This isn't ISIS. This isn't Al-Qaeda. So my question to them was pretty simple after that. So you would do this to me in your country. Why would I let you in my country? And there's more video of him talking. So yeah, I mean, that's just the local populace. And that, you know, that's what he's trying to warn us against. The next one that we have here is off of Natural News. And it says, bill introduced in Congress to terminate the EPA. The EPA was originally founded on principles of solid science and commitment to environment. For many years, it actually did a lot of good by clamping down on corporate polluters and reducing the contamination of rivers and streams. But today, the EPA is better known as the Environmental Pollution Agency. That spouts totally fabricated quack science while destroying the careers of honest scientists inside the agency who attempt to blow the whistle. To give you just a quick overview of the EPA's outrageous crimes against the environment, consider these facts. The EPA caused the Gold King mine large-scale toxic spill into into the Animas River, unleashing vast quantities of mercury and other toxic metals into sacred waterways of Native American communities. In fact, the EPA's extreme incompetence remains a grave threat to the safety of nature and our fragile ecosystem. The EPA legalized the mass pollution of farm soils and children's playgrounds across America with biosludge, a highly contaminated byproduct of raw human sewage and industrial pollution. This product, also known as biosolids, is currently recycled back into the U.S. food supply via fertilizer distribution, despite alarming scientific evidence showing its extreme dangers. And there is a video that you can access here if you click on a link called Biosludged. Says, and you'll hear from a former EPA scientist whose career was destroyed by the EPA when he tried to sound the alarm. The EPA routinely colludes with pesticide companies like Monsanto and Syngenta to grant approval to extremely toxic pesticides that are devastating the natural world, such as the neoconics that are disseminating bee pollinators. Thanks to the independent media like Natural News, we now know that the EPA actively covered up evidence for decades that linked pesticides to the death of pollinators. Just recently, the EPA approved yet another toxic herbicide called dicamba that's been linked to infertility, birth defects, and lung cancer. And even when the EPA is forced to admit that toxic pesticides are killing honeybees, it still allows their widespread use on food crops. For the last decade or so, the EPA has aggressively pushed the climate change science hoax, ridiculously claiming that carbon dioxide is a toxic poison that will doom humanity. In truth, CO2 is a blessing to the point given rise to reforestation, more efficient food production, and the more rapid growth of plants and trees in areas threatened by desertification. CO2 is a scarce resource, barely at 400 ppm in the atmosphere, and plant-based ecosystems are starving for it. And they have a link that you can click on. It says, see more reports on the kind of fake science pushed by EPA at Fake Science News. And this this article continues. It says the EPA runs armed paramilitary enforcement teams that stomp around streams and ponds, threatening farmers and ranchers by claiming federal control over every last drop of water that might eventually drain into a river or stream. Quite literally, the EPA spends money on AR-15s, ballistic vests, and other paramilitary gear in order to pull off its mission of expanding its power into an armed, unelected bureaucracy of dangerous science quacks. Here's a depiction of the EPA's armed enforcement teams might look like, not an actual photo, just a dramatization. And there's a picture there that you can pull up, take a look at these guys. And like I say, it's just a dramatization. It's not the real thing, but the real thing could probably be worse. It's just, see this Natural News article, which describes the terrifying rise of militarized federal agencies, including the USDA and EPA. And that's a link you can click on in this to get a load of that. The USDA has used its military power to threaten people who grow lemon trees, force large fines on people for selling bunnies, confiscate raisins for no real reason, and ruin the livelihoods of small farmers. And that I can justify for, because I could tell you some stories. One USDA SWAT team even seized bees privately owned that were proven resistant to Monsanto's GMO Roundup and killed all remaining queens. This shows the insidious relationship between crooked corporations like George Soros, Monsanto, and government agencies. USDA is not alone in its abuse of power. The Bureau of Land Management, the BLM, and Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, have recently used their SWAT teams to bully Americans for lobbyist interests or to punish political enemies. I could go on, but the bigger point here is that the EPA is a quack science ministry of environmental BS that must be stopped. It says introducing HR 861 to terminate the Environmental Protection Agency. Unfortunately, or try that again. Fortunately for our future, Representative Matt Gaetz, Republican of Florida, has introduced a bill to terminate the EPA and end its reign of science terror over America. And you can pull that bill up and take a look at that. There's a link in this article for that. It says the bill is co-sponsored by Representative Thomas Massey, Representative Stephen Palazzio, and Representative Barry Loudermilk. Beyond its introduction, no action yet has been taken on the bill. It rests in the committee at the House, Energy and Commerce, Agriculture, Transportation, and Infrastructure, Science, Space, and Technology. With President Donald Trump having now nominated Scott Pruitt to head the EPA, it begs the question, will Pruitt actively seek to dismantle or even shut down the agency he's running? If so, it would be a historic victory for the liberty in America. The EPA no longer serves the interests of the American people. It exists primarily to serve the profit interests of poison-pushing corporations, while pumping up the climate change hoax for political purposes, while poisoning America and selling out to corporate interests. EPA leaders pay themselves inflated salaries and bonuses while collecting lucrative government pensions paid by future taxpayers. It's all such a massive evil scam that the EPA must be shut down to save the environment. This doesn't mean we don't need some kind of level of regulation of polluters, but The EPA, as it exists today, has zero interest in pursuing that goal anyway. It's time to bulldoze the EPA and start over. And it says, stay informed about the EPA at epa.news and epawatch.org, and read the book Science for Sale by David Lewis, PhD. So there you have that information. The next one I have here is off of BizPack Review, and it says, con anti-Trump protesters block ambulance. Medics had to do emergency procedures in the trunk. Connecticut patient was prevented from getting to the hospital by anti-Trump protesters over the weekend. Upwards to 200 protesters opposing President Donald Trump's executive order on immigration and refugees blocked an exit ramp of I-95 in New Haven on Saturday, according to CBS affiliate WFSB. Paramedics were forced to perform an emergency medical procedure in the ambulance due to the delay. The protesters were in the process of being cleared from the highway, state police said in a statement, according to masslive.com, but not before they had obstructed an ambulance carrying a critically ill patient. Due to the delay, ambulance personnel were required to perform an emergency medical procedure in the ambulance instead of at the hospital. Surprisingly, given the leniency police often grant these protesters, a man identified as the leader of the protest was arrested, masslive.com reported. Not that the liberal hero didn't go down without a fight. Police saw Norman Clement, age 66, barking into a microphone and loudspeaker and set upon him. Clement ran from law enforcement personnel through the crowd, knocking over several of his supporters before being apprehended, police said. Clement actively resisted arrest and was sprayed with pepper spray. He was charged with inciting a riot, disorderly conduct, interfering with an officer, and reckless use of a highway by a pedestrian. The next one we have here is off of Liberty Writers News, and it says liberals are pissed that incredible thing Trump just did to bring back American jobs. Have y'all ever wondered exactly how Donald Trump plans on fixing up our economy? Well, here you have it. Today, he sat down with a group of top bankers, including legendary CEO Jack Welch, and revealed he plans to bring back our economy and jobs. Oh, man, if you guys want to see what crazy person looks like, just try showing this news to a liberal. And there's some video in this. The article goes on and says he told Titans of Industry, there's nobody to tell me better about Dodd-Frank than Jamie, CEO of JP Morgan. So you're going to tell me about it, but we expect to be cutting a lot out of Dodd-Frank. In case you do not know, the Dodd-Frank Act was passed by Obama following the 2008 Great Recession. It put a series of intensive regulations on banks and other businesses, which slowed their work down and increased their cost by a buttload. Dodd-Frank isn't the only good news from today's meeting. Donald Trump also revealed during his meeting that his new groundbreaking health care bill is almost ready, and right after that, he will be slashing taxes across the board. So there you have it. Our economy is on the rise. Jobs are coming back, and it's all thanks to President Trump. So there is that one. The next one is off of Western Journalism. It says, Tillerson warns, we can't let personal convictions stop teamwork. Speech as Donald Trump's Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson warned Thursday morning that he plans to reform the State Department and told his new team to brace for changes to how things are traditionally done. I remind you that our undertakings are larger than ourselves or our personal careers, Tillerson said in his introductory speech to the State Department employees in Washington, D.C. Amid dissenting views about the Trump administration's suspension of the refugee program and the temporary ban on visitors from 7 mainly Muslim countries, Tillerson emphasized the importance of rising above politics. I know this was a hotly contested election, and we do not all feel the same way about the outcome. Each of us is entitled to the expression of our political beliefs, but we cannot let our personal convictions overwhelm our ability to work as one team, he said. Let us be understanding with each other about the times we live in as we focus our energies on our departmental goals. If you want to pull it up and see it, it says Tillotson said that the first thing he asks himself every morning is, are all of our people safe? And I'm going to try to shut the video down. There we go. It says the safety of every single member of our State Department family, regardless of where he or she is posted, is not just a priority for me, it's a core value. And it will become a core value of this department, he said. The former Exxon CEO said that he will have an unorthodox approach to leading the State Department, but promised he would not make change for the sake of change. As Secretary, I will deploy the talent and resources of the State Department in the most efficient ways possible, he said. That may entail making changes to how things are traditionally done in this department. Change for the sake of change can be counterproductive, and that will never be my approach, but we cannot sustain ineffective over optimal outcomes. I will gather information on what process should be reformed, make sure that we are productive and efficient way possible. Tillerson said he thought he was prepared for retirement this spring after 4 decades of business experience prior to receiving the call to serve President Trump. Tillerson's wife, Brenda St. Clair, and I were ready to take off to the ranch and enjoy our grandchildren, the newly confirmed secretary explained. But when I came back from my first meeting with President Trump and he asked me to do this, Brenda said, you didn't know it, but you've been in a 41-year training program for this job. So despite our own dreams, she said, you're supposed to do this. Well, my first day is here. I'm on the job, he said. Hi, I'm the new guy. There's 248 names on the memorial plaques at the State Department, which contains the names of Americans that have died in 64 countries, according to the American Foreign Service Association. Recent additions include the U.S. Ambassador to Libya, Christopher Stevens, on September the 11th of 2012. Tillerson spent a few extra moments paying tribute to fallen foreign service personnel during his first day on the job. They died in service of cause far greater than themselves, Tillerson told his staff. As we move forward in the new area, it's important to honor the sacrifices of those who have come before us and reflect on the legacy that we inherit. And the final article I have in this episode is off of Conservative Tribune, and it says, forgets vote on Gorsuch, so anchor drags out congressional record and humiliates him. Fulfilling yet another of his campaign promises, President Donald Trump drew from his prepared list of potential Supreme Court justices to nominate Judge Neil Gorsuch to replace the late Justice Anton Scalia on the nation's highest court. As could be expected, liberal heads exploded at the conservative nomination, and some Democrat senators immediately vowed to filibuster Gorsuch and do everything in their power to keep him off the bench. Washington Post, Democrat opposition to Gorsuch may not be as staunch as party leaders would like their progressive base to think. As several Democrats up for re-election soon in the red states must walk a tightrope to preserve their careers, while others are on the record as having supported Gorsuch for his current court posting just 10 years ago. Take, for example, Senate Minority Whip Dick Durbin of Illinois, who momentarily seemed to forget that he had to vote to the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals in 2006. On live TV during an appearance Wednesday on MSNBC's Morning Joe. He had concerns over the independence of Gorsuch and that the judge would have to go through hearings and reach a 60-vote Senate threshold to be confirmed. But co-host Willie Geist said he had not raised any objections to Gorsuch 10 years ago. That you voted A in the voice vote in 2006 when Gorsuch was up for federal appeals court? Geist asked innocently. Willie, and I just don't remember. You have to hold still here. And I just don't remember, to be honest with you, replied Durbin. On voice votes, you don't make much of a note on it, and it's possible. I don't believe there was a lot of controversy surrounding it. He's moving from triple A ball to the big leagues here, and he's going to be deciding vote on the future of the court for a long time, it appears, he added, asking, the congressional record shows you did vote in favor. It was a unanimous vote, but has something changed in your view of Gorsuch since 2006 when you did the A vote for him? No, but just take a look at what has happened in the past, Durbin responded. When someone moves up to the Supreme Court level, different important questions are asked, and people are much more careful. Watch a video of Durbin being reminded of his vote in this article. It says Senator Dick Durbin most likely didn't forget that he had voted to confirm Gorsuch in 2006, as did Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, along with former President Barack Obama and former President Joe Biden, both of whom served in the Senate at that time. The truth is, Gorsuch is, by all accounts, eminently qualified for the Supreme Court post, and any opposition mounted by Democrats is simply for the sake of opposing Trump on all fronts, no matter what. So there you have the political news. I'll have some more episodes for you this morning. So if you like what I'm doing here, give it a thumbs up, share it on your social media so everybody gets to enjoy the news. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done that way, gone that way yet. And that way you'll stay informed.